Hey, thank you so much, and welcome everybody. We're so glad to have you here. I'm so excited for what we have planned for this panel today, and I'm so excited for the incredible authors and editors we have with us. So let's go ahead and have everybody introduce themselves. I'm Brittany Passmore, your moderator. Enough about me. Let's go ahead and start with Julie. Will you introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Julie Wright. I'm a managing editor for Sunwire. It's a health food supplement company, and I handle their online. I do acquisitions and pay and everything. Anyway, that's my editing job. But I also am an author. I've written 25 novels, and I have 15 published. My 16th will be coming out next week, and that is this one. I'm super excited about that. And I just got my author copies like a week ago, so I'm like, look how pretty they are. I love that. It's the best day ever. And yeah, that's me.
Perfect. Let's have Nic introduce yourself now.
My name is Nic Nelson. I am the founder and the senior editor at Wordsmith Writing Coaches. We are an outfit in Los Angeles, California. We work with both academic, people needing dissertation coaching and helping people to publish their dissertations either as trade publications or in academic houses. And we also work with authors, especially aspiring authors. Our most popular workshop is called Your Path to Publication. But there's a team of about 8 of us doing all sorts of different things. We work with screenwriters and we do even corporate communications and stuff like that. We've edited a lot of books over the years, and I'm excited to be on the panel.
Perfect. Let's have Christine go ahead and introduce herself next.
Hi, Christine Nielsen. I publish under both my name and a pen name, CM Adler. I have been freelance editing full-time for a year now, thanks to COVID and kind of that deep inside search of what it is I would really like to do with my time. I have a background in teaching English, and so editing is very similar to that, especially when you're working with a new author. And so I have a lot of experience and really love working with people who might not really have, their writing process, their personal writing process nailed down. So I really love kind of that coaching part of the process.
Awesome, thank you. And now let's have C.H. Hung go ahead.
Hi, my name is Cindy Hung. I go by Cindy, so you all are free to call me Cindy, but I write under C.H. Hung. So I'm a science fiction fantasy author primarily of short fiction right now. And I got my start editing in the journalism industry, so it's a little bit different. It's fast-paced. I mean, we're turning things around like this. So, and then I moved into copy editing in the marketing industry and the freelance editing, both fiction and nonfiction. I'm currently the lead editor for damninteresting.com, which is a website that writes nonfiction articles on science and history. So that, again, is a little bit different than fiction. So my style book is AP, which I know is going to make some of you a little bit horrified. Nic is clapping. But also, I've worked on the other side of the table as a writer, hiring freelance editors as well. So I have experience on both sides of the table when it comes to figuring out whether you're ready, to take that next step and hire an editor.
Perfect. Great. We have so many wonderful experienced people here with us. I'm so excited to hear all your thoughts on how you know when a manuscript is ready for editing. So let's actually go ahead and just have somebody or even multiple people just kind of quickly run through what are the different stages of editing. We have developmental editing, substantive editing, copy editing, proofreading. Sometimes there's even other levels among that. So let's quickly just summarize what are these different levels and how you can just to get a broad overview of what that
is.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to talk about the writing process in general. So you have your pre-writing stage, you have your kind of rough draft, first draft stage. That would be more of the developmental stage. And then once you have your story structure, or if it's nonfiction, your basic nonfiction structure in place and you feel like everything's where it's supposed to be, and then you go to more of the content line edits, which you go from bigger to smaller, and then after content line you would move on to proofreading. So a new focus for me, even in my own writing, is plot editing. So working on the story structure first. Even for people who are pantsers, you still kind of can hit that stage and make sure that your story structure or your book structure is in place before you spend a lot of time on the words.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you brought up the plot editing thing, because that's something that we do a lot of too. The traditional way of thinking about the different kinds of editing is just developmental and copy editing and proofreading, and there's really a lot of different. You can parse it out a lot more finely than that. But I think one of the things that a lot of authors overlook is the kind of help that you can get from a writing coach or a developmental kind of editor in the very beginning, before you've even written the first draft. And that's kind of what you're talking about it. But it's because it's not sort of one of the standard recognized roles for an editor. We don't have like one particular term that we use for it, so it can be a little confusing.
Great. Any thoughts from Cindy or Julie on that?
I would actually like to add, as a discovery writer, that's me. I have tried plotting. I have tried outlining. I have failed miserably at so many different methods. And I have worked with a writing coach to sort of front load my plotting and help me through some of that. And then once I sat down and started writing, it all went out the window. My discovery process just took over and everything just, went from there. So if you're a discovery writer like I am, don't feel bad if you are having a hard time front loading a lot of that plotting and developmental editing up front. One thing I like to do is to just get the draft out. And I'm actually in the middle of writing a new novel right now, and I'm just putting words down. And then later, once the first draft is finished, I go back and analyze it from a post-writing perspective. And that helps me fix the developmental editing from that end of, okay, this is what the structure of my plot looks like. I kind of screwed up a little bit here and there. And then I'll fix that. And so you can work with a developmental editor on the backside once you have a finished draft. So don't feel like, you have to front load everything. Everyone works differently. So you just need to figure out the process that works best for you.
I'm a pantser too, Cindy. I'm so with you. It's like I would totally give you a fist bump of solidarity if we were in physicality here. But I seriously though, it's kind of hard, because then you get halfway through a book and you're like, oh wow, this thing needed to happen, and I need to go back But I find that when I outline it beforehand, or if I do that, get that idea beforehand and I have it all figured out before, the pantser part of me just takes over, and then I go somewhere else. It really does just go out the window. But I find that sometimes the discovery process is really important for me, because then it's like I get to a certain point and it's like, okay, now here I am, but I wanted to be here. And now I actually can look and see the different paths that I could have taken to get there. And it actually opens up my eyes to those paths that might have been invisible to me before. It's like all of a sudden they're bright and shiny, and I can see. It's like, oh, that's what I could have done, and that's what he could have said, and that's how that alien creature could have reacted. And so for me, it process of getting to a point in the book where it's like, okay, now I get it. It makes a difference for my editing process. I'm just rambling. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. One of the most helpful things to do with editing is to not think of it as something that has to come first. I mean, editing. Mm-hmm. I meant outlining. Like, don't think of outlining as that thing that has to come first. And if I skipped it, then I've missed my chance. You can feel free. Look, if you know the story you want to tell, start telling it. Just go. And then when you get stuck, sometimes it's really helpful to stop and outline what you just wrote and figure out where you want to take it. And then, just like Julie said, like you'll see, oh, I see. Now I have to do this. And if I were to change this thing in the beginning, it would be easier for me to get here. And then your revision process is suddenly clear to you, and then I guess you don't need me. So, well, never mind all that. Just call us for help. No, I'm kidding.
No, you've all given these great insights to how the writing process sort of reflects the editing process. There's a time when you're trying to figure out how the overall plot of your book works. There's a time where you're trying to make sure that your prose sounds the way you want it to. And then there's a time to worry about where the commas go, right? And all these different levels of the writing process reflect the different levels of the editing process. So let's jump into a little bit more about how you know which stage of the editing process you're ready for. So from the author's perspective, how do you know if you're ready to look for that help to make sure that your plot is ready versus your prose? Like, right, how do you know which editor to look for and when you're ready for that?
You mean as far as whether you're ready for like developmental edits versus content or line edits? I think it's a gut hunch as far as how you feel about your story. Like Julie was talking about being able to go back and look at the way the story is developing, and then like, the path that the story was supposed to take and how to get there and that kind of thing. It's if the path is clear to you, you're probably not right then in need of an editor. If you feel like you've done as much as you can with your own work, looking at it super closely, and you're ready for someone else to bring in that perspective, that's when you're ready for an editor. And that can be at any stage in the process. And I think, so we talk about the writing process, which is not linear in any way, shape, or form. You go all over the place in that thing, and eventually you end up with your final draft. And so you can go to the end. I mean, when you draft and you get to the end, but you're not to the end, you go back somewhere in the middle, and you're somewhere in the middle of the writing process. You're at the beginning of the process, taking your chapters back to an outline. So I feel like a lot of interpreting at what point you're ready for an editor is you knowing and owning your own experience and your own ability to perceive at what point your work is and when you need to have like some help with something.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of this is going to boil down to how comfortable you are and how confident you are in your writing abilities and your writing skills, if you will. So writing takes a creative brain and editing takes an analytical type of brain. So you're using two different parts of your brain when you're trying to do writing and editing. So let's say your writing is done, you're done with your creative brain. When you review your draft, and you're using your analytical side of your brain to see how ready it is, I would, first of all, if it's a long story, if it's a manuscript, set it aside for a little while. Don't look at it. I mean, you just spent, however long immersed in this world, immersed in these characters, and your creative brain is still firing. It's going to keep firing because you've thought about the story for so long. So set it aside for a little while. Don't come back to it. If it's a short story, you don't have to set it aside as long because it is, by nature, shorter story. Go back to it maybe in a couple days, a week, depends on your schedule and your writing process. And that way, when you go back and review your writing, you have a fresh mind and you can sort of reset your mind into that analytical side, right? And once you've gone through your story and you've fixed as much as you possibly think needs fixing, I recommend you give it to a reader to gauge their reactions. And I know that's a completely different topic. And then once you get through that, then think about editing and what kind of editing you need. And some of it's going to boil down to quite simply your budget. A developmental editor can be quite expensive depending on their rates, whether they're billing by hour or by project. And if you have the resources to hire one, great. By all means, find one and vet one and hire one. But if you don't have that money and you don't have those resources, then perhaps, move it further down the line of, okay, are you ready for copy editing? Your plot's good, your character's good, your story's good. It's as, far along as you're going to get it on your own. Then maybe think about copy editing because they're going to help you improve your sentence structure and your clarity and things like that. And if you don't have the resources for that, then minimum, find a proofreader because they will find typos and grammatical errors and things like that. So I think a lot of what you can do is going to be based on what your resources are like.
Yeah, and can I just say that for all of us on this panel, there are different ways of getting our help. And there's always a free way. There's always a way to get some help from us for free. Either a free initial consultation, or if you attend a writers' conference where one of us is doing a pro critique or something like that, often your first pro critique is free with the fact that you paid for the conference. Or maybe the pro critique is just another $50. And boy, that's a lot cheaper. I charge $400 for a simple manuscript critique. And I know I've seen there are people who charge more. But between $200 and $500, I just put this in the chat, is normal for a manuscript critique. But sometimes, look, if you've never had a pro look at your manuscript before and it's finished and you're throwing it at the wall and nothing is sticking, maybe your first step is, just sit down with one of us at a writers' conference in the bar and buy us a drink and chat with us for a little while, or hire a manuscript. Get a manuscript critique. Why pay me $800 for 2 months of developmental editing when you can just pay me $400 for and get a manuscript critique? It's going to be a very thorough critique. It'll give you a lot to think about and very specific things to fix, which I'm sure everybody on this editor panel can do a critique like that for you at whatever price we charge. I see people are asking about critique groups. Do you want us to talk about that, Brittany?
Sure. I think that relates to, how you know when you should get a critique group versus beta readers versus an editor, right? So that would be a great question to address. Like, how do you know, like, which one to go for first, or should you go with one first always? Yeah. How do you know which one to go for?
All right. I'm going to take this because I run a couple of critique groups. And one of my biggest fears for writers, because this has happened to me, it's happened to a lot of people, is, when you're brand new as a writer and you're just trying to find your voice and trying to find your process and trying to, figure all these things out for yourself, the last thing you need is for someone to come in and say, you're doing this all wrong. And it just absolutely destroys your confidence. It absolutely destroys your desire to even want to write. And so when I introduce people to critique groups, I'm very, very careful to sort of nurture that creative spark and say, you're still discovering a lot of things for yourself. And so what I say is my reaction as a reader, and not me telling you you're doing this all wrong. And other people in that group, I'm coaching them to do the same thing. So I would say if you've never had your stuff read before, then yes, find someone you trust. And yes, it can be your mom. I know this probably goes against a lot of other advice out there. But if you need that confidence boost, then sure. But what you're after is a reaction from the reader, right? You're after this part was awesome. This part was boring. This part was confusing. This part was something I don't believe. Mary Robinette Kowal, who's the Science Fiction Writers of America president, has a really great 10-minute video on this. And I can definitely send the link out. I should probably find it because I share it all the time. And it's just a really great way to sort of get that reader reaction from your readers. And so you want to find people you can train to do that. When it comes to critique groups, I say it's like dating. It's like getting married. You are testing and trying out a lot of different people and a lot of different groups, and each group has a different dynamic. So if one group doesn't work for you, leave. Go find a different group. There's a ton of different groups out there. So the groups that I run, I am never offended when someone says, you know what, this isn't the group for me. I'm like, great, that's fine. So yeah, find a group that jives with you, because it's going to be so critically important for you to get a trusting relationship with that group before you go and hire an editor. Because I'll be honest, that was one of the mistakes I made. I went and hired an editor too quickly. I wasn't ready for one. So.
So
I
it
agree
sounds
100%.
like you think a critique group should come before an editor in most cases, right? Awesome.
Yes.
Hey, Julie, any other thoughts from you about like the difference between critique groups and beta readers and editors and how to know which one you need?
I think for me, the writing process is very important. It's very personal. Start with yourself as an editor. So you are your own first line of editing. So for me, this is my crazy process is I read out loud to my husband. Because while I'm reading out loud, I catch things I didn't catch while I was writing the manuscript. And so I'm able to catch those things. And then by gauging his reactions, if he's crying where he's supposed to cry and he's laughing where he's supposed to laugh, then I know that I did okay. And I'm ready to send it out to other people who might not be as generous about their attitudes towards my writing. And so then I go to critique group, and then from there, my beta readers, my critique group. I don't really have a critique group anymore. I'm on deadline a lot, and I don't have time. That process is a little too slow for me anymore. My deadlines are too fast, and so then I just go to beta readers, and from there, then I go to my editor. But to know when you're in the right space for that sort of a thing is super individual. And I used to do freelance editing until I got my full-time job, and now that's what I do all the time. But nothing is worse than slogging through a manuscript that's not quite ready, and where somebody just, okay, I did my NaNoWriMo, I did my, I wrote this in 30 days, and now I'm ready. Woohoo! I'm going to get published. And it's like, maybe just step back a little bit and do your research. Read a bunch of books on writing and get that kind of feel for that. There's a ton of really great reference books out there that can give you information on how to get your grammar right and everything. And grammar is not even just getting your plot right and making sure that your dialogue sings and it sounds authentic, and to make sure that you're hitting all of those places where you need to. And so do a bunch of reading first, do your research, read over your manuscript yourself, and then ask yourself, was I legitimately entertained? And if you feel like you were legitimately entertained, then maybe now it's time for you to go to your critique group and did you cry at the end when you're supposed to cry? Are you laughing at your jokes? Do you think you're funny? And if you don't, if you're bored, your reader is so bored. So you need to make sure that you, as your first audience, are comfortable and that you feel confident that you can move to the next level. Because if you're not entertained, nobody else is. And as a freelance editor, I'll go ahead and I'll do it. I'll do the edit. I won't be thrilled about it. And it's so much. The edit that you're going to get when you're not ready is super different from the edit you're going to get when you are ready. You're going to end up with totally different feedback. And when you're not ready, the feedback you're going to get is, oh, I'm so rambly. I'm sorry. This is my third panel and I just can't shut up now. You started and now I'm like, woohoo, I'm going to go. But when you're not ready, you're going to get feedback that's basic that you can learn from a reference manual versus learning from a pro like Nic here who can teach you all the awesome things that you're not going to get from a reference manual. So, that sort of a thing. And now I'm going to shut up.
Oh, thank you, Julie. That was great. Yeah, go ahead, Christine.
I just wanted to validate the reading out loud. That's something that everybody has access to. And you don't even have to have a human being listening to you. Read out loud to yourself or some stuffed animals or your dogs, but you will hear more than you will read with your eyeballs. And something I saw all the time in teaching is that as human beings, because of so much media that we have coming at us all the time, our auditory vocabulary is often larger than our visual vocabulary.
Yes.
And so you will be drawing on kind of a modern strength in our society by reading out loud. So that's a huge tool that we have just to ourselves that doesn't cost you any money. Also, I believe, like for me, and I hear it from these guys too, if I receive a manuscript that I don't feel is ready for an editor, I will let the author know. So as an author, don't be afraid to query or send an inquiry into a professional editor. They are not going to take on your project and charge you a bunch of money just for fun. There are a lot of ethics around editing and being a professional editor and freelance editor, and we really uphold this career pretty highly. So you know what? If you don't know, just ask an editor. Ask for references. Find an editor. Say, hey, I'm not sure at what stage my manuscript is at, and I know that many of us would just be willing to say, hey, why don't you try a few different things, and you can get a lot of this done on your own without spending a lot of money on an editor.
Can I add a quick tip?
Yeah, go
I
for
did
it.
make that joke. Yeah, yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Simi.
Sorry. In Microsoft Word, there's a text-to-speech function, and you can highlight your text and have the AI read out loud to you. So if you don't want to read out loud yourself, you can have the AI do it. And I often do that for my short stories and for short bits because there's like a limitation where it doesn't do, you can't highlight 100,000 word manuscript, for example, and have it read the whole thing all at once. You have to chunk it. But I often will have it start reading, and then I'm like doing something else. And then when it's missing a word or it's tripping up on a word, it kind of flags something in my brain that says, oh, the sentence is wrong. And then I'll go back and check it. So, Word.
I made the joke that I would take it. Actually, when I was freelance editing, we had a thing where I was kind of under the umbrella of a company who did that, but they did a free 10-page edit. And so if at the 10 pages I realized you're not really ready for me, I would say, I've given you a lot to think about in this 10-page edit that I've done. I need you to take all of this that you've got in this 10 pages and go through your entire manuscript before you even consider resubmitting. Because at that point, if they haven't, you can tell in 10 pages whether or not somebody's really ready for that. And so that was one of the, like you said, there is a level of ethics. So I know I made the joke, but I didn't mean it. I won't actually take your money if you're not ready for it, because honestly, I don't have the time for that. So yeah.
I love
Yeah,
that.
that's true.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick. Did you want to say something?
Oh, just saying, I agree with everything Julie just said. At Wordsmith Writing Coaches, we only do 5 pages of a free sample edit because we found that people do the Christian Saruya thing with editing sometimes, where they'll take advantage of everybody's 10 pages of free editing, and they'll manage to get a Frankenstein edit of a short story or something. And guys, don't do that. Because each one of us on this panel, every editor that you meet is going to be a little bit different. We are bringing a different viewpoint to your story. And if you cobble together a Frankenstein edit out of all our free, the free edits that we offer, it can actually be harmful on the developmental level of things. Enough said. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah,
Pet
no,
peeve
that's
of
a
mine.
very good point. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Nick. So we've talked a lot about how authors can kind of start to figure out what level they might be at. Any tips for the editors out there who are trying to figure out what the manuscript is ready for? Just quick tips for editors.
I'm blowing a fuse in my brain. I just wrote an article about this, kind of a long article. I don't know where to start. Okay, so there are 3. I'm speaking to editors now, right? Okay, the 3 main questions that you need to ask yourself before you get deep into the weeds are just as you're reading it, whatever genre or type of writing it is, just ask yourself, is it working? In other words, if it's comedy and the characterization is horrible and there's all these problems with it, but it's really funny, like as you're marking the heck out of it, you can't help but chuckle as you go along, it's pretty good. If it's horror and you're kind of getting those weird spine tingles even as you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, this is horrible and this is horrible and there's no arc here at all, and this is not how you start, all those mechanic things. But if it's working, if a piece of writing is working, then um, you're approaching it in a different way. You're fixing a vehicle that runs already. But if the piece of writing that you're looking at is not working, if it's an article and it just is not logical. It's beautifully written. The prose is like, oh my gosh, this person is a poet, but they're not making sense. Then it's broken in a fundamental way, and you need to look at it differently. I never waste time copy editing a story that doesn't run. You've got to make it run first. You've got to make the thing work first. And another thing about editors is be very, very careful that you define the what we call the scope of work. Because the only time that Wordsmith Writing Coaches has had unhappy clients is when we weren't clear about the scope of work. And they thought that we would do something different than we actually did, or they thought that we would do more than we actually did, or they thought that, all of the milestones would be met in phase one, when actually the whole point of having more than one phase to the project is because the milestones are going to be spread out. It's those kinds of confusions. We very, very rarely have anybody. I can't think of a single time in 17 years that we've had a client upset with how we actually edited something. All of the unhappy clients are unhappy because of timing or billing or scope. It's always a businessy reason that people will be unhappy. So I guess I'm talking to both sides of the equation. If you're an author and you're thinking about hiring an editor, go to Ingram Spark. Ingram Spark has a great article. Maybe I can pull it up. You know what? After I finish talking, I'm going to pull it up and I'll put a link to it in the chat here. But Ingram Spark has a great brief little article about what to think about, just like 5 basic things to think about before you hire an editor. Go ahead, guys. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, I love that. Any other thoughts from anybody about the editor side, or how authors and editors kind of need to meet in the middle to figure this out?
I do think that Nic pretty much covered it, as far as there's a lot involved with setting expectations, and that establishment of expectation is what really helps everybody be satisfied at the end. So for a lot of authors, finding an editor, or on the side of an editor working with an author, a lot of that is keeping an open dialogue. So if you're hired for one type of edit, and the first few chapters look like they're going to only need content or line edits, but then you get deeper into the story and you find more, then a lot of that is just keep the discussion open. Say, hey, this is what we had talked about. This was the expectation. Now I'm running into some of these other things. If you would like me to address those, it's going to look a little bit differently, and we almost kind of need to reestablish that expectation. But it's really communication that's what I think it boils down to.
Yeah, to add to everything that Nic and Christine have said, this is where your sample edit is so crucial, because you're vetting the client as much as the client is vetting you. And if you turn around a sample edit and the client comes back with a laundry list of, well, I don't understand this, I don't understand that, or can you clarify this, you can sort of gauge where that client is going to be in terms of writing ability and how much handholding they might need. And at that point, then you can make the decision of, is this going to be worthwhile for both of us to take on this project? Are they actually ready for me? And then you can have an honest discussion with the client then.
Awesome. Well, great. I think we've had a lot of really great discussion, and I know there have been a lot of questions in the chat. So why don't we go ahead and open it up for questions now, and our producer will help introduce questions, and we'll start answering more questions from the chat.
Great. You guys have had a wonderful panel. Jay Gosling asks, as an editor, what are some tips on informing writer clients they need to do more work on their draft in a constructive way?
I do this all the time. Go ahead.
Oh, you could go first. It's up. Yeah. Go ahead.
Me? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't find it difficult. The reason that I'm doing this instead of something else, because there are several other careers that I could have right now, which would pay me a lot more money. And the reason I'm doing this is because I love it. And I love the authors. I love you guys. I really do. And so I don't find it difficult to talk to you when your writing sucks. And I won't say it exactly that way, but we'll get to that point. And I guess the way to do this kindly is to start out by asking the person questions. It will really, really help for you as an editor to couch your responses to people when you understand a bit more about where they're coming from. Just two quick examples. Um, I love you, random citizen. Yes, I love that. um, um, one of my dear clients who actually, so I want to preface what I'm about to say by saying she now has 6 books in print and her 7th is coming out soon. Okay. And not but and when I met her, my first thought as I was talking with her, and she might be listening to this right now, so don't feel like I'm talking behind her back or anything. My first thought when I first saw her writing, we met at this at a thing for writers, and we started chatting, and she said, "Well, can I send you my manuscript?" I said, "Sure, I'll take a look at it." And my first thought when I saw her manuscript was, "Ooh, this looks like it was written by a 5th grader." And I spoke with her and realized that's about the level of education she has. And like it really is approximately, she finished high school, but it wasn't the sort of high school where they work real hard on your reading and writing skills. And so rather than saying, "Holy cow, like, did you ever finish high school? Like, what's wrong with your writing?" Instead of saying something like that, I asked her. I said, so I focused on the content of the story first, which was frankly tear-jerking. A very deeply moving story, just poorly told. And so I asked about the content of the story, and I found out, all kinds of interesting things. Uh, a criminal, this and that, and it's just fascinating life. There's an article coming out about her in a magazine. She's being interviewed for a magazine, and she just had me proofread the bio that she submitted to the magazine. So you can read all about her life in 3 months, I think. But yeah, so she writes about incarceration and children of incarcerated parents and things like that. Um, and I realized that in order to edit her authentically, I needed to preserve her author voice. And it was a real challenge to fix enough things so that the story came across clearly and lucidly and powerfully, but not make her sound like, one of my academic clients who's, working a postdoc and trying to get a book published. You know what I'm saying? So I'll just leave that as the only example. You need to understand who your author is and what audience they're writing for. And with a little bit of polish and some work here and there, her audience loves her books. Loves her books. She's never going to be a Caldecott winner, but that is not her goal. Not every author has the same goal. If I'm working with an author who wants to be a Caldecott winner, and I began my book editing career in children's books, then yeah, let's go for it. Let's talk about children's writing as prose poetry, and make sure every word, every syllable is exactly perfect. But that's not where this particular client was coming from or going to. So, so once you understand a little bit more about your clients, you'll be, and like once we started talking about writing ability, she's the one who said, "Oh yeah, I just completely suck as a writer. I hate writing, but I have to. Like I know I'm doing this really, really badly, but I have to do it, for these reasons." And so, all of a sudden, you know, uh, you know, talking about the fact that her writing is bad, once she has started using those words, it just puts the whole conversation in a different light. So, end of ramble. Carry on, guys. Give us some different examples.
Yeah, does anybody have any other thoughts on how to constructively tell an author what they can improve on?
I think that it's important to tell an author what they've done well and what their strengths are. I think sometimes as they're growing and developing, they're maybe not completely clear on what they are good at and what they might need to work on. And a lot of them are, and they will actually be more than happy to hear that feedback from you. So I do like to spend time making sure that they know that they do have strengths, and then within those strengths, framing some of the things that they need to work on. But also, if I'm not necessarily their primary resource, if they're not ready to hire me as an editor, then I am very happy to refer them to other online sources like articles that Nic has mentioned and things like that, where they can immerse themselves. Even coming to LTUE, I've recommended to several people. Like, it's a very great place to get a solid foundation in everything to do with writing and publishing. So that's one way to give them that feedback.
I love that. Any other thoughts, or are we ready for another question? Okay, let's have a new question.
Okay. Regina asks, where would a critique group fit into the process? And along with that, where did that question go? Felicity asked, should critique groups be other writers in your genre, or should they be general readers or a mix?
I'm going to step in on the critique group thing. As far as whether or not they should be in your same genre, I don't think that they need to be in your same genre necessarily. They can be, and that's great. They need to be at your same professional level, though. It helps a lot if they are, so that you are contributing to their work and they are contributing to your work in an equal kind of way. I was in a critique group, and I talked about this in my last panel, where I was the only published author. And so they were afraid to critique my work. They wouldn't critique my work. Instead, I got lots of applause and, oh, yay, I loved that. And it's like, oh, that didn't actually help me. It's not really what I was going for. I mean, I'm glad you love it, but it would be super awesome if you told me what you didn't love. So getting someone in your same professional level where you're all comfortable enough that you can share legitimate help. I think it is helpful if, like, you're one of the panelists from the previous panel, I don't remember who, but she made the comment of it's important for you to have a similarity in genre, at least that they're reading in that same genre, because your proper romance author is going to have a very different perspective from your hardcore science fiction author. And so they might not give you the advice that you need for the audience that you're writing to. So and I'll shut up now.
That's very important.
So one of the things I like to tell writers is there are absolutely no hard rules in writing. I mean, there's no rule you cannot break, right? And so while having readers in your genre really helps, the key thing I would focus on is making sure whoever you're asking to critique your work is familiar with the tropes of your genre. One of the hardest things that I had to manage in my mixed group, I had a critique group that was mixed genres, was someone was writing literary fiction, for example, and the genre fiction writers just completely don't get it because it's not a genre they typically read, right? And so I have a literature degree. So to me, switching between literary fiction and genre fiction is second nature to me, but it isn't for everyone else. So make sure that whoever's reading is familiar with the trope, so at least they can help you navigate of, okay, I recognize you're using this trope and you're using it well, or this is a new trope I've never seen before. That's a great piece of feedback to have too, as well, for example. But if you have, if you're writing a romance and you got people who don't read romance and they want a not so happy ending, you need to find new readers.
I agree.
I just want to echo that same sentiment about an editor's background as far as what they are well read in and what they are familiar in as well, not just critique groups, but editors will also have a scope of genres and types of works that they are the most effective with, even if some of them are willing to take kind of anything. You really, as an author searching for an editor, but also if you're looking to get into freelance editing, be honest about what your strengths are and what your best is. And that's part of setting up those expectations so that everybody's satisfied at the end.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. This is one reason why some of us who've been editors for a while, you eventually kind of accumulate a group of colleagues around you who do different things from what you do. Like I know myself well enough to know that even though I enjoy it every now and then, I'm not the right editor for dark fantasy and horror. So there's someone else on my team who does that really, really well. I do hard science fiction and soft science fiction, and I do Western because I've grown up in those genres. I love those genres. I do high fantasy, but if you're doing a paranormal werewolf vampire book, I'm going to refer you to someone else. So yeah, know thyself, editor.
Great. So many great thoughts. I think we have time for just one more quick question when we have 2 minutes left. Let's see if we can get a quick question in here at the end.
Okay, Mary asks, do you find manuscripts or query letters are ever rejected because of a couple grammar or spelling mistakes?
Sure. Depends on the mistake. First of all, guys, be careful. Don't misspell the person's name. I mean, like, really don't. Like, there's no excuse for misspelling the agent's name. And I know at least 2 agents who do. Like, if my name is they will say in conferences publicly, if my name is misspelled, like, that's like, the story about the brown M&M in Van Halen's contract. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You can Google it. If Eddie Van Halen found a brown M&M in the bowl of M&Ms in his dressing room, he would cancel the contract. He would cancel the concert because he knew that if they hadn't noticed that detail in the contract, if they got that wrong, then they probably got a bunch of other details in the contract wrong, which, the lives of him and his band members depended on, about how the pyrotechnics were going to be set up and how much weight the stage needed to hold and stuff like that. So it wasn't as weirdly control freaky as it came across at the time. But many, not all, but many agents are the same way about the spelling of their name and other things like that. Just be careful. Just don't make dumb mistakes. If you accidentally get something wrong, it's no big deal. Basically, if it's a typographical error that is genuinely, that's all it is just a random rare typographical error, no one's going to turn down an opportunity to take on a manuscript or a new author that they're really excited about because I was going to take on this amazing book, except I found a typo in the last paragraph, and now for some reason I am honor bound to dismiss it. No one's going to do that.
Yet, if your manuscript or your query letter is riddled with grammar errors, that's an indication that the book will not be ready.
Yep.
You want it to be as clean as you can possibly make it.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Sounds like we've finished up with that question. And thank you all so much for your thoughts and your incredible answers and your insights into both the author side and the editor side.